Hi everyone, welcome to Great Books, Big Ideas. On today's show, I want to talk about the great books of the Western world and the 1952 set. I want to take a look at the contents of these volumes. I'll do a little bit of scorekeeping as to how many of these works have I read over my reading life, and we'll tally that up. And then also I want to talk about approaches to reading the great books in general, but actually more specifically to this set. So at the end of this great conversation volume that we've been going through, there is an addendum, and they talk a lot about different approaches you can take to working your way through the volumes in this set. So let's see what that's all about, give you some ideas for approaching great books reading, and it should be fun. So first of all, I want to dig into the contents of the Great Books of the Western World, the 1952 edition. There are differences between the 1952 books and I think it was the 1990 edition. That's what these look like. And I won't talk about the 1990s at all for now. That's for another day. We're just going to look at the 1952 sets, which seem to me to be more widely available. A lot of people have acquired them used, or they have them in their families. So let's take a look at these volumes and see what's inside of them. Okay, here's our contents of the Great Books of the Western World. We start with Great Conversation. That's what I just did a whole series of videos on. And I read that whole volume, so 100% complete on that. Volumes 2 and 3 are called the Syntopicon, and that is a vast index of cross-references of all these great ideas, which are listed here in the back of each volume. These great ideas are indexed. You can look up various facets of these great ideas as presented in different volumes in the set. I'm going to skip over these. These are not the kind of books you read cover to cover. They are reference works, although Mortimer Adler, I believe it was, wrote introductory essays for each one of these great ideas. But that's more of a research tool. So we'll skip volumes 2 and 3. Volume 4, we're going now in chronological order. That's how the volumes are arranged. We're starting with the Greeks. Homer, the Iliad, and the Odyssey. Yes, I've read these 100%. Volume 5 is all Greek drama. Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes. And I've read all these plays in this edition, so yes, completed those. The next volume 6 is Herodotus and Thucydides. These are early historians, terrific works, and I did complete that reading many years ago, the first history volume in the set. Then we've got Plato, volume 7, all these dialogues, and I have read all these. Volume 8 is Aristotle. He split into 2 volumes, and of these, I'm about 80% of the way through this volume, and then I've read a few works here in the second volume, especially the Ethics, Politics, and Poetics. Then we have our first volume of scientific works, math and science type works, Hippocrates and Galen. And this is, I think, the only science volume that I've managed to make my way through. Volume 11 is more math, so you have Euclid, Archimedes, Apollonius of Perga, and Nicomachus of Gerasa. Yeah, that one's on the back burner. Volume 12, Lucretius, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. This is a volume, I'm pretty sure I've read this all the way through. The only one I'm rusty on is Epictetus, but I think I've read the discourses. I know I've read on the nature of things and the meditations. Some of these I have not read in the Great Books of the Western World editions. I've read them in other editions. So for instance, Meditations, I read the Penguin Classics version. Moving on to Virgil. The Aeneid, the Eclogues, and the Georgics. I've read this volume all the way through, and I've also read Virgil and other translations. Then we have volume 14, Plutarch's Lives, and I am currently working my way through this one. I'm about 80% of the way through. I just finished Alexander, so I have a few more to go, but I think I'll be finished Plutarch before the year is out. Then volume 15, more history. Here we have Tacitus, the Annals, and the Histories. I think I've read one of these. It's been a while, but we'll call it that 50% completion on that. And then more math science, Ptolemy, Copernicus, and Kepler. Volume 17, Plotinus, the 6 Enneads. I did read that in the Great Books edition. Then we move on to getting into the Middle Ages. St. Augustine, the Confessions, City of God, and On Christian Doctrine. Confessions I've read 2 or 3 times. City of God I read in a modern library edition, or read most of it, and have not read On Christian Doctrine. Then we have St. Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica, in 2 volumes, and this I've only dabbled in, haven't gotten too far. Volume 21, The Divine Comedy, Dante Alighieri. I've read the whole Divine Comedy, but I've read it in paperback editions, not this edition. I can't tell you who the translator is. I'll have to look that up. Volume 22, Chaucer, Troilus and Cressida, and the Canterbury Tales. I've read all this all the way through. And then volume 23, Machiavelli and Hobbes. And here I have read these both, but both these I read in Penguin Classics editions. Volume 24, Rabelais, Gargantua and Pantagruel, just an incredibly funny comic novel. But I've read that in Penguin Classics edition, not in the Great Book set. Montaigne's Essays, I've read that in a modern library edition, but I made it all the way through. Really terrific. I want to talk about Montaigne a lot more someday. Then we move on to Shakespeare, all his plays. And yes, I've read all the Shakespeare plays, not here in the Great Books of the Western World. I've read the Pelican Shakespeare edition, which was my college textbook. Volume 28 is a science volume. William Gilbert, Galileo, and William Harvey. Haven't not touched those yet. Volume 29, Cervantes, Don Quixote. I have not read this volume, but I've read Don Quixote, and I think it was a Signet Classics mass market paperback. Terrific novel. Bacon is the subject of volume 30, and I've only dabbled in Bacon, but he's on my bucket list. Then we move on to philosophy with Descartes, and for these I have read Discourse on Method, and I think that's it. Maybe some of the Meditations. Spinoza is also in this volume, Ethics, and I did read the Ethics. Not an easy read, but I did get through it. Then volume 32 is all John Milton, and I've read all that all the way through. Volume 33 is about Pascal, and I've read a Penguin Classics edition of some of his Pensées, and I think that's about it. There's a mix here of math and philosophy. Volume 34 is another math science volume with Newton and Huygens. Have not touched those. Volume 35, John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. The only one of these I've read was Berkeley. I've dabbled a little bit in John Locke, but I really haven't made an attempt to summit the essay concerning human understanding yet. And Hume, I've just read in excerpts, but also on the bucket list. Volume 36, more literature. Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift and Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Stern. Both of these are just awesome works of literature, and I have read these, but not in this edition. Volume 37 is The History of Tom Jones, another great early novel by Henry Fielding. I've read that in a different edition. And then we have Montesquieu in volume 38 and Rousseau. Have not read Montesquieu yet, but Rousseau I've read these two works, Social Contract and Discourse on the Origin of Inequality. Volume 39 is Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. I've only dabbled in that so far. And volumes 40 and 41 are The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, that great work of history by Edward Gibbon. I'm currently reading that. I've been on hiatus from it for a while. I'm really liking it, but it's a real massive work. It's going to take some time to get through it. Kant is volume 42, and here the only one by Kant I've read is Critique of Pure Reason, but you get some other works by him in here. And then volume 43 is American State Papers. So yes, I've read the Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution. And then you get the Federalist Papers, which I haven't really read too many of the Federalist Papers, I'm sad to say. John Stuart Mill, the only one of these I've read is On Liberty. And then you get to biography in volume 44, James Boswell, The Life of Samuel Johnson. Have not read that one yet. Here's a science volume with Lavoisier, Fourier, and Faraday. Volume 46 is Hegel. Of these works, I've read The Philosophy of History. Volume 47 is Goethe's Faust. I've read that all the way through, both parts 1 and part 2 included in this volume 47. Volume 48 is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I have read that, but not in this edition. Volume 49 is Darwin, Origin of Species and Descent of Man. And that's on the bucket list too. I haven't really done much with Darwin yet. Volume 50 is Marx's Capital and Manifesto of the Communist Party. I have read those all the way through, but not in this edition. And then volume 51 is War and Peace. Yes, I've read Tolstoy's great novel, but not in this edition. Dostoevsky, Brothers Karamazov, also finished it, but not in this edition. And William James, The Principles of Psychology, have not really read that one yet. And of Freud, you get a nice sampling of Freud's work. And I've read a few of these, some of the papers on hysteria and some of Interpretation of Dreams and maybe Ego and the Id, definitely Civilization and Its Discontents, and some of the introductory lectures on psychoanalysis. So I have a ways to go with that. Okay, so by my reckoning, I have completed approximately 55% of the works in those volumes. So quite a ways to go. And I've been reading these books for somewhere around 43 years. Obviously, these aren't the only books I read. And I've read many other classics that aren't even covered in this list of books. But it's a pretty good completion rate, I have to say. As far as the literature volumes, I've probably completed close to 100% of them. But the math and science volumes, virtually none of them. So anyway, it's a lifelong reading project. What can I say? How do you go about reading these books? Well, the editors of the great books of the Western world, they give you some possible approaches to the set. One is, there are a couple ways to do it, or to just follow your nose. So if you are interested in quote unquote great ideas or big ideas, you can look up these ideas in the Syntopicon, those two reference volumes, and you can start exploring the cross references and just sort of dip into and out of the books and read the one chapter here, chapter there, and so on and so forth, if you want to follow the thread of an idea. I don't think that's the best way to go about it unless you have a particular purpose. You need to do some research. And one of these days I'll give you an example of that, how I actually use the Syntopicon to prepare a lecture. It's fun, but it's just not, I don't think it's the best way to set about a reading plan. The other approach is to just kind of go in any order that you want. So you start with a work that interests you at the time. Maybe it's the Canterbury Tales. Maybe it's Hamlet by Shakespeare. Maybe it's the Apology by Plato. about the trial of Socrates. Maybe it's David Hume, and you just read one of the works by those authors or the whole volume by that author, and then you see how that maybe leads on to the next author that might relate to it. So you could sort of follow your nose that way, just kind of go based on what you're interested in, and the more reading you do and research you do, you find out like, oh, okay, now that I finished that play, maybe I should read a different play by someone else or something. So that's a valid way to go about it. You could also do read by genre, if you will. So they label these, they color code the volumes. And let's say you're interested in literature, well, then you should read the green labeled volumes, because those are all going to be plays and poetry and fiction. Or maybe you're interested in math and science, and you want to go with the darker green volumes. Or if you want to do politics and history and things like that, social theory, then you would go for the blue. And if you are interested in philosophy and theology, that would be your reds. And that's how you can go about sort of wading your way through the different volumes. Okay, now I'm going to focus mainly here on two basic options aside from the following your nose technique or following by genre. One is to just read from start to finish. So the volumes are arranged chronologically, and you can just start with the Greeks. I think Homer's volume, the first one. And then you just kind of go from Homer to the Greek dramatists, to Herodotus and Thucydides, and all the way through that table of contents I just showed you. So if you want, that's good if you're like historically minded and you want to see like the relationship of ideas as they develop and they get conversed about over time. This will give you some inkling of it. Remember, the editors made a strategic decision when they put these volumes together is there's hardly any apparatus. There's no editorial, there's no footnotes unless they're included in the original books. All you get is like a little brief introductory essay. I'll show you one for Plato just to show you how little you actually get. You get a biographical note. So in the Plato volume, this is from the 1990 edition, you get that, and that's it. Okay, and then you just jump right into the dialogues from there. So they really want you to absorb these books for yourself and not have them spun for you at all. So I like that approach, but it does put certain demands on readers, and you're really going to have to fend for yourself. You can always do research on the side. You can watch people's YouTube videos about these works and these authors, and so you can fill in the gaps if you need it. But just keep that in mind if you're going chronologically. Like, no one's going to be connecting the dots for you. You have to do it on your own. And then there's another approach, and this is the one I want to spend a little more time on, and that is the 10-year reading plan. So in this supplement to Volume 1, After the Great Conversation essay by Hutchins, you get this 10 years of reading in the great books of the Western world. And let's take a look at that one and see what might be involved. So here what they're going to do is they're saying we're going to present, I think it's 18 readings per year, and they seem to have assembled these with some kind of method. There's a method to their madness, I think, but they're not really going to tell you much about why they're putting these upside one another. You just have to, I think they just feel like these works pair together nicely, and they progress, I think, in levels of difficulty as you go year by year. So let's take a run through that real quickly, and let me know what you think about it in the comments. For the reading plan, I think this is for readers who don't quite know where to start. They want someone to point the way a little bit, and they may be a little bit intimidated about reading these vast volumes. And this is going to give you little more digestible parts of these volumes, and also give you a sense that you're going someplace, that you're making movement, progressing. So we start with Plato, and by the way, these are roughly chronologically ordered as you go through from start to finish of the year, with the exception of this one, Apology and Crito, is a little bit after the Clouds and Lysistrata by Aristophanes. But we start with the Greeks. Plato, you read 2 dialogues, Apology and Crito. Then Aristophanes, 2 plays, Clouds and Lysistrata. And then you read the first 2 books of Plato's Republic. Then you read Book 1 of Aristotle's Ethics, Book 1 of his Politics. And then you read a few lives by Plutarch, right here. And then the New Testament, Gospel according to St. Matthew and the Acts of the Apostles. The Bible is not included in the set for obvious reasons. Most households back in the day would presumably have a Bible at hand. Then Confessions by St. Augustine, books 1 through 8. So you're not reading the whole Confessions, but you're reading a good chunk of it. And then The Prince by Machiavelli, books 1 and 2 of Gargantua and Pantagruel. And a nice selection of essays by Montaigne. Hamlet by Shakespeare, John Locke, second essay concerning civil government. 2 books of The Social Contract by Rousseau. A couple chapters in the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and then some American state papers and Federalist papers, a little bit of The Wealth of Nations, and the Communist Manifesto to finish out year 1. Year 2, you're going to be reading the Iliad, the Oresteia trilogy by Aeschylus, 2 classic plays by Sophocles, a couple books from Herodotus, the history, Meno, a dialogue by Plato, the Poetics by Aristotle, more of the Ethics, and then here's our first work of Mathematics by Nicomachus, books 1 through 4 On the Nature of Things by Lucretius, the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, Part 1 of Leviathan by Hobbes, the Areopagitica by Milton, and then a whole bunch of Pensées from Pascal. A lot of these are probably short. And then also a mathematical work by Pascal, Gulliver's Travels by Swift. Not sure that's the whole novel, but you're reading a good chunk of it. Maybe you are reading the whole thing. Rousseau, Discourse on the Origin of Inequality, some Kant, and some John Mill. Every year it's 18 readings. And then you reset, you go back into the past, starting with the Greeks. So year 3, we read another play by Aeschylus, more of Herodotus. Now we're getting into Thucydides, another Plato dialogue, some more Aristotle. Here's Euclid, some geometry for you, some Tacitus, St. Thomas Aquinas, Chaucer, Macbeth by Shakespeare, Paradise Lost you get to read year 3, some John Locke, some Kant, John Mill, Lavoisier on chemistry, and parts 1 and 2 of the Brothers Karamazov, and some Freud. Now this might seem like a lot, but if you dedicated yourself to it, I think you could probably manage it. Year 4, you're reading a bunch of plays by Euripides, some more of the Republic. We jump to books 6 and 7, another dialogue by Plato, some more Aristotle, Physics and Metaphysics. Again, not these complete works, so you're reading selected chapters. Confessions by Augustine, Aquinas, Montaigne. This is a very long essay by him. Galileo, Francis Bacon, Descartes, Sir Isaac Newton, more John Locke. Now we get David Hume, Kant, Moby Dick. You're going to read the whole book. Brothers K, parts 3 and 4, and William James. Year 5, we move to more Plato, Aristotle's Categories, and On the Soul. Some Hippocrates, Galen, the Aeneid of Virgil, Ptolemy, Copernicus, and Kepler, Plotinus' 6th Aeneid, St. Thomas Aquinas, more of the Summa, and the Inferno by Dante, Harvey's Motion of Heart and Blood, Part 1 of Don Quixote, Part 2 of the Ethics by Spinoza, Berkeley's Principles of Human Knowledge, more of the Critique of Pure Reason by Kant, Darwin, Tolstoy, books 1 through 8, and William James. And then we go back for year 6 to the Old Testament, reading Genesis, Exodus, and Deuteronomy. The Odyssey shows up in year 6. Then the Laws of Plato, book 10, Metaphysics, book 12 by Aristotle, Tacitus, Plotinus, Augustine, Aquinas. Now we read the Purgatory by Dante, and looks like about 3 or 4 plays by Shakespeare. Part 1 of the Ethics of Spinoza, Milton, Pascal, back to John Locke. Then we go to Gibbon's Decline and Fall. More Kant, introducing Hegel's Philosophy of History, the introduction, and a bit more of War and Peace. Year 7, back to the Old Testament with the book of Job, Isaiah, and Amos. Plato's Symposium, Philebus, more Ethics by Aristotle, then Archimedes, the Discourses of Epictetus, Plotinus, Aquinas, the Paradiso of Dante, Gargantua and Pantagruel, more of that. Some more Shakespeare plays, Galileo, more Spinoza. They really break up the Spinoza. And Newton, Huygens, Kant, and John Stuart Mill on utilitarianism. Week 8, you're reading some plays by Aristophanes, the great comic dramatist. Another dialogue of Plato, more ethics, Aristotle's rhetoric, Augustine on Christian doctrine, Leviathan Part 2 by Hobbes, 2 classic tragedies by Shakespeare, Francis Bacon, Descartes, Spinoza. Surprised at how much Spinoza is in here. Locke, Sterne, Tristram Shandy, Rousseau, Adam Smith, Boswell, Parts 1 and 2 of Capital, and Part 1 of Faust, and William James. Year 9, Plato, Thucydides, Politics of Aristotle, books 7 and 8, Apollonius, the New Testament, several books, City of God, a couple books from there, some more parts of the Summa Theologica, Gilbert, Descartes, Pascal, Fielding, Montesquieu, Fourier, a lot of science in the year 9, Faraday, Hegel, Marx, and Civilization and Its Discontents, a book everyone should read. Year 10, 2 plays by Sophocles, another Plato dialogue, and Aristotle on animals, Lucretius, the shorter poems of Virgil, more of the Summa by Aquinas, Canterbury Tales, more Shakespeare, and then Harvey on the Generation of Animals, Part 2 of Don Quixote, Kant, Boswell, Goethe Part 2, Darwin's Descent of Man, some more of Capital, more William James, and Sigmund Freud. That finishes year 10. Wow. So if you can make it through that 10-year plan, I think you could call yourself pretty liberally educated, or at least you're well on your way. Even if you did half of that, I think you should be happy about it. Let me know if you think that that is at all feasible, if it's something you would be interested in. I think for me, that how I went about it is more or less the chronological approach plus the follow your nose approach. So a lot of the literature I was getting, following my nose and things that I really want to read that, so I'm going to read it now and I'll jump ahead. But as far as the philosophy and the histories and things like that, a lot of that I've been pursuing chronologically. But if I had done the 10-year plan, I think I would have gotten a nice range and the feeling of the scope of the volumes, like the whole set. And I think you would feel a sense of accomplishment. You would really feel like you're getting to know these books, you're living with these books, and then every year you come and cycle back through again, you get a little bit more of them. And you get, I think every author is represented at some point in that 10-year plan. So you're getting exposure. But I'm just curious what you think of it. Do you think it's a good idea? What's your approach to reading classic books or this particular great book set? What's worked for you? What hasn't worked? And let us know in the comments. Hope you enjoyed this little tour through the contents, and I hope to see you back real soon. Take care.